We chose this research project because we feel it's socially important because of the large population of first-generation students at Texas A&M. This project can help raise concerns regarding first-generation low-income students at Texas A&M. It can also create discussions surrounding it and will address the social challenges that these students face in everyday life. It can further process the gaps between being a low-income first-generation student and educational success, which is what we are aiming to find out in this study. Despite there being a growing number of first-generation students at Texas A&M, many have a harder time adjusting and a lower academic performance compared to continuing generation students. We looked at factors that might contribute to the first generation's difficult transition, motivations for attending college, and the support system both financially and academically. In our study, we hypothesized that first-generation students of low income at Texas A&M University are more likely to experience less educational success compared to continuing generation students due to limited resources back home, financial status, lifestyle attributes, and a gap between their education versus their parents' previous education.
Excuse me? Are you a first generation student?
Yes.
What's your name?
Talia.
How important is it to find a community support as a first generation student?
Community support is one of the key variables we measured in our study. This is a factor that many can relate to wanting or having in order to improve their educational success and find a support system that can help or motivate them to achieve academic goals.
I think it is important. I don't really dabble into it, but I think it is important.
Do you think there's an advantage for continuing generation students to have educational success?
Of course.
Although this wasn't a question that we had asked in our original interviews and surveys in our main research paper, it's still interesting to see other people's opinions and point of views on this topic.
Of course. Education is like pursuing a higher education limits performance.
How so?
For example, I'm a polls major. It's like when you're highly knowledgeable in things, you're well-rounded as a being and you're empathetic. And so
How important are family support systems for influencing educational success?
Family support was a question that we had asked in our original surveys and interviews. This is a factor that we felt was important to ask and gain insights for further analysis.
incredibly important. Incredibly important. That's basically all it is. A lot of kids, I think, grow up thinking that school is like boring. They don't really want to go. So they like never try to pursue it on their own unless your like parents like force you to go to school. So when kids are like kind of taken out of that like path, it's very hard to get back onto it.
Do you think first generation students approach their educational goals differently than continuing generation students?
Although when we conducted our surveys and interviews, we did not ask the respondents to compare the continuing and first generation students explicitly. This is also another question we thought would be interesting and get other people's opinions on.
Yes, because a lot of the students here that are first generation strive to be the first in their family to get degrees most of the time. So it's good to get a degree.
Thank you. Sorry, what's your name?
Sebastian, Kaya.
If you could give one piece of advice to a first generation A&M student, what would it be?
I would say to get involved on campus, meet new people, find your group.
Perfect, thank you.
Excuse me, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, what's up?
Can you give me like a minute or two, just kind of like answering the question of like what advice would you give to a first generation student?
I myself am a first generation student, so I would recommend other students to always work really hard. College is a very tough place, so it's gonna bring you down to the very low, but you don't have to give up and always do your best to try to achieve success.
Okay, thank you.
This goes hand in hand with one of our studies done by the psychological science. The study done by them aimed to find if a difference in education intervention between first-generation students and continuing generation students, where students were taught about their transition into college coming from different backgrounds, could help with their transition into university. from high school, and increase academic performance and use of resources for first-generation students. The results found that a 1-hour difference in education intervention at the very beginning of the college year reduced the achievement gap between first-generation and continuing generation students by 63% at the end of the first academic year. It also improved college students' psychological, academical, and social engagement transition into university. A lot of first-generation students don't receive like a seminar like this, helping them transition into college from high school, which could be highly beneficial since most of them, like their parents didn't go to college, so they struggle a little bit more when it comes to transitioning or getting involved on campus, which is as opposed to continuing generation students who already have the stories and experiences of their parents to help them kind of guide themselves through college. They also aren't as motivated by being the first one to get a degree in college.
If we can take a look at the data that we have collected between the first generation students versus our continuing generation students, we can see that there's a clear difference in numbers. We can see that for first generation students are actually, they have less family support, and due to the family support, we can assume that there's, we can see here that their stress levels are higher than the continuing generation students, and we can see that their satisfaction is also the same and their average of motivation. This can all go into factors just by having less family support. If you don't have the family support, the motivation to go to class is significantly lower. Since you have not motivation to go to class, you're feeling more stressed, and it affects your satisfaction overall in the university. As we see as a continuing generation students, we can see that they have more family support, and the motivation to class is way higher than the one that we have for our continuing generation students. And this can be due to multiple factors and contexts that we actually talked about in our interviews, such as multiple people had a lot of other responsibilities like work and things like that for first generation students, where our continuing generation students they often just they participated more on campus activities, and they didn't have to work, so they spent more time on achieving and doing homework and things like that, as first generation students lacked on that support and things like that. So our numbers do go in hand with our hypothesis of showing that first generation students they, due to the lack of support and the lack of advantages that they have in the class, they do seem to have a less educational success. And so this is kind of a little bit of our findings. As we conclude our findings, we can see that overall it shows that first generation students actually do face more challenges when it comes to academic success and emotional well-being. As we can see from our data and from our charts, we can view that multiple of these first gen students are actually have lack of motivation, and which can affect their stress levels and of their overall educational success. This is largely due to lack of resources from the university overall and the support from the students, and this can cause students to have a lower education success. But this study can overall encourage college campuses to include first generation students when improve different ways to support them and provide other resources to help this outcome change.
Overall, our findings conclude and support our hypotheses that first-generation students face more challenges when it comes to both academic success and emotional well-being. It's largely due to lack of resources and family support. A lot of continuing generation students have that advantage of having their parents who both went to college to help them out with applications or any financial. And this was actually shown and said by one of our respondents earlier in the interviews. Her name was Talia. She said that first generation students are mainly driven by the fact that their parents didn't go to college and they are the first ones to graduate from college.